Well, welcome everybody. We're grateful to have Clay Conroy here with us. This is the regular twice a month webinar series that we do here at Ag Steward, and we love to have guests from the regenerative agriculture industry come and speak to us and be able to share their knowledge. And I'm sure that probably all of you are familiar with Clay and the work that he does with the Working Cows podcast. So we want to give a good solid plug to that. We're grateful for the great guests that he has on there and the work that he's done, and it's definitely a labor of love. So this is live. Those that are on here, we're going to go ahead and mute folks. We encourage you to participate in the chat. If you have questions, do that. We're going to do some informal Q&A at the end. But yeah, during the presentation, just go ahead and stay muted and we'll roll through this. So we've invited people to type in the chat where they're from. And if you guys come with a specific intention for the meeting today, we sure would welcome that, so that we kind of can direct the conversation as needed. Clay's going to be talking to us, and I guess just put in the chat, those that are here live, give us a thumbs up or type a number 1 if you've listened to at least one episode of the Working Cows podcast. Type a 2 if you listen to it like weekly, like it's religious. And I know probably a lot of you do. No, hundreds of them. Yeah, there are hundreds of them, huh? How many have you done, Clay, to date?
So I was working on episode 372 today.
Wow. And how many years?
6.5, be 7 in November.
Very good. No, that
Yep.
is amazing. Well, when you started out, we'll just do a little informal here, but when you started out, did you have a vision for where that was going to go?
No, not at all. It's far exceeded my wildest expectations. Just kind of wanted to, you know, I loved podcasts probably more than anything. I loved podcasts, and so just that's what got me into it. Is Dallas Mount suggested in the class I was taking with him and Aaron Berger and Blake Hopman, the now defunct High Plains Ranch Practicum, that somebody in the room should start a podcast. And I'm like, man, I love podcasts. I grew up on a ranch. I can ask a reasonably intelligent question about cows. So I dove in, and he probably first suggested that in May of 2017, and by November of 2017, I launched with the first episodes, and just kind of what attracted me to it was I like podcasts and it was fun to make one. I like talking to people, and this opened up the opportunity to do that. And I have continued to grow in my love for ranching as I've continued to learn more about it, as I've continued to go down the rabbit hole, or as the Dunning-Kruger effect has continued to kick into high gear, where the more I learn, the more I know I don't know. I've continued to love ranching more as a result of that. I grew up on a ranch but didn't really love it. Now I love it, and I love it more every day as I continue to learn more about the beauty and the complexity and the diversity that God put into this whole intricate system.
Wonderful. Well, we're grateful for the work that you've done. Like, you have served our community like none other, and you're kind of a household name, probably not only amongst Regen Ag, but agriculture in general. But I think you definitely are focused. I would say probably a little more focused on the Regen side, especially with your partnership with soil health consultants and understanding ag, right?
Yeah, I'm sure there's some people out there who are using that name in vain or as a cuss word, like that dang Working Cows podcast, and giving our kids all these wild, harebrained ideas, but
Yeah, that's good. You kind of push our paradigms a little bit, and we need that.
yeah, my own get pushed every day, and so I'm just trying to help other people listen along as I learn. So
mm,
for sure.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, good. Well, we've got nearly 30 people on here live, and a lot more that are registered that'll be watching the replay. Plus, this is going to go out on podcast channels, both on Ag Steward or the Profitable Steward, and then the Working Cows. And so we hope it has the reach that that it needs to have, and we kind of leave that in God's hands of how it does, because he's a lot better marketer than we are, right? And so
And
no doubt, probably I guess, what would you say has been before we dive in here, what has been the thing that's made you successful at having the reach that you've had? And
yeah, this will come up too towards the end of the presentation, but I think it's one. Well, first of all, it's God's blessing. I've never been this successful at anything in my life, honestly. And then maybe after that, it's being too dumb to quit. um, I've heard people say you should be able to make a good living at podcasting after 3 years. Well, it took me about 5. So, I was just 2 years slower than everybody else who's stuck with podcasting long enough to make a living at it. So, um, I think
yeah,
that I think that the key to success in podcasting is consistency, honestly. If people know that they can find you regularly in the same spot, and I haven't done a great job of that. I've released some episodes a day or two or a week late, but if you could release every day every week at the same time, um, that would be, I think, the number one key to success, honestly. Um, and then content, it would be second. And I think that the guests that I've been blessed to be able to connect with over the years have carried the water. I've just
yeah,
tried to keep my nose above the water as I ask the next question, and uh, not being afraid to ask a dumb question. I ask a lot of dumb questions. I'm sure everybody's sitting there slapping their foreheads like, how does he not know this yet? But I just ask it because I'm trying to genuinely satisfy my own curiosity. I just want to know. So,
yeah, that's great. Yeah, always be curious, and that's a good principle. So, well, very good. Well, I told somebody once when they asked if I was an entrepreneur, I said, well, I've got the manure part figured out, right? I'm not sure about the entrepreneur. And so, um, we're going to talk about entrepreneurship. I think that's a pretty cool topic. I mean, I consider myself an aspiring entrepreneur. I've definitely had that bug of, I love, I, not only myself creating businesses and serving our fellow man, but I also love to see young people start off with a dream and be able to make a business and monetize that. And it bugs me that so many dreams out there are squashed. When other people, well-meaning people, say, just go get a job, go to school, get a job. And I think that, if we study the cycles of history, we're in a cycle now where that is somewhat obsolete. And entrepreneurship is kind of what we need to be able to create leaders to lead us through, these kind of turbulent times, these uncharted waters. And so I'm grateful that you're willing to talk about this, and I really look forward to this presentation. So let's jump right in.
sure. Yeah. Well, Jared, thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be here. And yeah, what is an entrepreneur? I think if we're going to talk about ranchers as entrepreneurs, we should start by defining our terms and making sure we're all speaking the same language here. And this is a nerdy definition. I borrowed this. You can't really steal things from anarcho-capitalists because they don't believe in the idea of intellectual property. And the guy who came up with this is an anarcho-capitalist, and so I don't feel like I'm stealing it. I just borrowed it. But he said that an entrepreneur is an individual deploying heterogeneous capital resources in pursuit of money, profits, and as I put that into rancher language, I say that we're using multiple streams of income in pursuit of profit. I think that's really what sets entrepreneurs apart to me. It's the business startup, it's that starting something from scratch, but then it's also diversifying the streams of income so that it's not just one thing that we're getting income coming to us from. And so, for example, in my life, I am a pastor by trade. There's a salary attached to that. I am a podcaster. There is income now, as I just said. Took me 5 years when most people do it in three. But there's income that is related to that. My wife and I and my family, we manage a small postage stamp of grass that we bring in outside cattle for the growing season, and run a few of our own sheep. Somebody one time asked me at the sheep sale barn, "Aren't you the Working Cows podcast guy?" And I said, "Yeah, my sheep that I own and somebody else's cows. That's how we handle this." So I think Jared would appreciate that. So so that's kind of another stream of income for us. And even within the podcast, we've got generous supporters through Patreon. Some of them stuck with us for years, and we have that as a stream of income too. So there are a few income streams that I couldn't live without right now, but all of them together mean that we've got opportunities that we wouldn't have otherwise. And I think that's part of it, right? We're getting those multiple streams of income coming into our resource base and deploying them further investment. I think that's another thing that sets entrepreneurs apart. Rather than just taking money and building a massive savings account, they take that money and they invest it in something else. They try to grow something, either invest in someone or start another business. That's another business we started was selling sea salt for livestock. And so that's an experiment. We're investing some time and some resources into that, and some materials and some equipment into making that business work. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go forward. But that's kind of what an entrepreneur is. And now I want to caveat this next slide, because we're going to talk about what is a rancher. And this is going to be the most boring definition for a rancher that you've ever read. And we'll come back around to that at the end. But what is a rancher? A rancher is an individual that raises calves or lambs to be marketed to the next person in the chain of custody on the way to being consumed as protein, right? And this is just the most generic definition of what a rancher is. If you were lucky enough to find somebody on the street in a city somewhere who knew what a rancher was, this is kind of maybe in the line of what they're thinking of when they think of rancher. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that is a little bit later, flesh that out a little bit more. But I mentioned earlier that it's multiple streams of income, right? And just think about the multiple streams of income that are available to a rancher as a manager of land, animals, money, and people. Just think about all of the streams of income that are available to a rancher. And we look at this just out of the cow itself. You've got calves, you've got cows, and you can sell those cows as culls, or you could sell them to someone else as replacement cows, right? You've got yearlings, you got replacement heifers, you've got bulls, you could sell those as culls or seed stock. And then I think that when we start to think like an entrepreneur, we start to look at those as potential streams of income. And we're not just selling our calves when everybody else is selling them. We're not just selling our cull cows when everybody else is selling them, right? We preg check in November and boom, we sell them. Well, we're free market people, right? If we're entrepreneurs, we're free market people. And free market, the base principle of the free market is that supply and demand determines the price, right? And so if we're selling our supply when everybody else is, that means that there's going to be less demand for the supply that's available, and the price is going to be lower. So if we think just for a little bit about when we sell calves, when we sell culls, when we sell replacements, and sell them when everyone is looking for them, then we're able to command top dollar for those animals. And so I just think about it for just a second before we start to say, oh, we're just going to do this like our neighbors do, and we're not going to have cows standing around here after they're preg checked open. Well, do the math. Look at it. How much does it cost me to keep that animal here? If I kept her here until the July 4th hamburger market hits in May and June, what kind of difference would that make? What would it be worth it? Would it be worth it to keep her that long? So just some of those things, we start to think differently about our streams of income and the streams of income available to us as rancher. But that's just the cows. Let's look at some others. And I know this slide's going to get a little bit messy, and forgive me for that, but I do want you to get a sense of the fact that there is way more going on in the average ranch than just we're selling calves, right? There's more opportunities, there's more streams of income, there's more opportunity for us to sell something that somebody else wants when they want it, maybe even when they need it, and command a higher price for that item than might otherwise be the case. So we move from cows, and I said bovine because we're talking not just about cows, but also bulls and steers, and so being technical here. But we move from cows to beef, right? They go and they become beef. Well, we can think out of the box about that too, because it's not just the beef that we're selling. The earliest animals traded in this country were traded for their hides before they were traded for their beef, before they were traded for their meat, right? The Western animal trade in California, some of the earliest animals here, some of the earliest bovine critters here, California trade was a hide trade, right? They were making textiles out of the hide before they ever started to really pursue those animals for their beef. And so we've got hides, horns, and heads that can all be sold if we're willing to do the marketing. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. But then there's also, on the beef side, obviously, there's direct marketing. You can retain ownership on those animals through the feedlot and sell them into the conventional market. You can develop your own market through a farmer's market. You can build out a brick and mortar store. You can host long table dinners on your ranch for people from the city to come out and eat a meal of produce and meat products grown on your ranch. And there's people that are making, great income streams out of those kinds of things. You can ship beef all around the country, or probably even the world. I don't know. I know one guy, one guy who's shipping beef, and I looked up some of his beef the other day. $52 per ribeye steak. $52 per ribeye steak, and he sells out hours after he stocks his online store every other week. Every other week, he restocks his online store, and every other week, he sells out of ribeye steaks at $52 a piece, hours after he stocks that. So there's another stream of income. And here's where this slide gets messy, because we're going to start just overlaying other things that we can do. So we've talked about the bovine and the beef. Those are streams of income in their own right. And I've given some examples of how we could develop those as streams of income. But now let's talk about the grass. We've got custom grazing. We can bring in other people's cows to graze on our grass, or we can bring in other people's cows to graze on other people's grass, a la Gray Judy and no risk ranching, right? We can lease out grass that we own to somebody else. We can use grass as an investment. We can buy grass somewhere else as an investment, hoping that the price will go up, or that we'll be able to lease it as an income stream. Or we can stack enterprises on it, right? Joel Salatin talks about stacking fiefdoms. I really like that idea, where, yeah, I think it's a great idea to have beef, lamb, pork, poultry, layers, all on every acre. I think every acre in America should have beef, lamb, pork, layers, poultry, right? Now, can I possibly do a good job of managing beef, lamb, pork, poultry, and layers on every acre of my land, and also be a husband to my wife and a father to my 4 children? No, I can't do that. So we can stack fiefdoms. We can say, hey, young entrepreneurial rancher or farmer or manager of Joel Salatin style chicken tractors, I've got land, I've got space where you're welcome to bring those Salatin style chicken tractors. I'll move them for you, or my kids will move them for you. You arrange the butchering crew, and you give me a cut of whatever you sell that that chicken for at the farmer's market, right? We can start to make those relationships, and that becomes another way that our grass can generate an income stream for us. The next one is concessionizing. We can concessionize. This is, I think, a ranching for profit term. Capitalizing versus concessionizing, right? Concessionizing is where we get to use that, have that as a stream of income. We retain it as a stream of income, and we get other streams of income off of it. I recently did an episode with James Koffelt of Ohio Land and Cattle, or Ohio Cattle Company, and he just blew me away with the streams of income that he has. And actually, he was an entrepreneur before he was a rancher. He did payment processing systems in schools and lunch cafeterias and like hospitals and stuff like that. And so he was an entrepreneur before he was a rancher. And so as a rancher, he thinks as an entrepreneur. And so he's not doing all of these things, but these are all things that can be done. And yeah, I know there's squabbles, right? South Dakota just went through a huge fight over the CO2 carbon capture stuff. So I'm not saying right, wrong, or indifferent. I'm just giving you examples. CO2 capture, wind farms, solar. You know, we can Indian leg wrestle later about whether or not those are good ideas or even genuine things that we should be doing, but they're options. They exist, right? There's hunting enterprises or on-farm experiences. You could do ranch tours if you want to be really invasive, or you could just say, hey, here's a quiet spot for you to come and read for a few days, or journal, or work on a project that you need some peace and quiet to work on. You know, these are just examples of streams of income available to ranchers. Then there's capitalizing, is when you sell it, right? You concessionize it, you add some stream of income to the land itself and generate that stream of income that way. Capitalizing it is you sell it, and maybe you relocate, or maybe you sell a portion of it. If you're in a place where land is very overvalued, you could sell a portion of it and buy land in a place that's undervalued somewhere else, and maybe then open that up to a young manager to come in, and he can lease it from you and bring in cattle. And you know, there's all kinds of options like this. And so some outside the box examples. Back to James Caulfield. He's fish ranching. He's fish ranching. He is raising carp, and they're harvesting, or not carp, but I don't remember what species of fish it was, but he's raising a species of fish on the water on his ranch, and he is harvesting them for the caviar. And I can't remember. I think it was $15 an ounce for the caviar that's harvested out of these fish. And I think, you know, each fish can produce quite a bit. And so it becomes a genuine income stream, right? And so we just have to be willing to think outside the box and approach things a little bit differently than our neighbors. And I'd encourage you to drop something in the chat if you can think of other things that I haven't mentioned here as streams of income, other things that people could do as a stream of income. And I think we shouldn't discount this horns, hides, and heads idea. There's lots of people out there who will pay top dollar for a nice longhorn steer head to mount on their wall. And so those become some pretty profitable critters to run, and then you can harvest the meat, sell it as ground beef, or maybe at marbles, I don't know, and then you can harvest that hide and the horns and the head, and all of those become income streams as well. So Jared, you got any thoughts there? Yeah, classes, education on the ranch.
Yeah, that's something that we're doing. And so we had a fencing project today, and we had what was there, 13 people out there with us. They're on the ranch for the summer, learning ranching, farming, and gardening skills, primarily from William DeMille and his second-year students that are here on the ranch. And so for us, that fits our context, and not everything does, right? I mean, maybe you don't want to be the turkey producer or whatever, but for us, education is important, and so that definitely fits.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an important thing to make note of. You know, not all of this stuff is going to be right for you. Um, I was talking to Dallas Mount, actually. I think it's going to be episode 373 of the Working Cows podcast. And he said, the most profitable, most successful benchmark ranches that they work with do one, two, or three things well. They do one, two, or three things well and at scale. And I think where we might try to do seven or eight things, not very well, not at scale, sometimes they don't actually generate income, or the stress that they also generate isn't worth the income that they do generate, right? And so I'm a fan of it, right? Why does entrepreneurship matter? Because it breeds innovation, resiliency, and passion, right? If you are an entrepreneur, you are excited about what you're doing. You're excited about it. Nobody's making you do it. Nobody's holding a gun to your head. I can honestly say I live an incredibly blessed life. I would do everything I'm doing now. I would do everything I'm doing now without being paid to do it. Right. And at different times, to varying degrees, I have done everything I'm doing now without being paid to do it. Right. Now, is there anything wrong with making a profit? No, absolutely not. Making a profit enables you to take care of your family and be generous and save. And as the scripture says, leave an inheritance to your children's children, right? A righteous man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. So it's good. It's good to make money and to be profitable, and we're responsible for what we do with it, right? I think Kent Donica said, making money isn't what gets you in trouble with the Lord. It's what you do with it after you make money that'll get you in trouble. And so I appreciate that, and I agree. So innovation, resiliency, and passion. Innovation. We're starting something new, but it's not always just about starting something new. Sometimes it's about doing something better than somebody else who's already doing that. Just doing it a little bit different or better. Introducing a more comfortable buying experience to them than somebody who's already doing the same thing. I was watching some TED Talks in preparation for this on entrepreneurship, and one of them said that the failure rate for the first person into the marketplace is 47%. 47% of the first people to get to market fail. Well, we always hear that being first to market is important, but he said the failure rate for those who are second to market but do that service or offer that product a little bit better, market it better, is 8%, right? And so it's not always just about being first to market. Sometimes it's about being a little bit better at whatever it is we're doing, marketing, just the buying experience, whatever it is we're doing. Sometimes it's just being a little bit better than other people who are doing the same thing at what we're doing. And then we see the success in that way. So innovation with an asterisk, right? And probably everything I'm going to say here today should have with an asterisk attached to it. But resiliency, multiple streams of income, right? Like I said, there are certain streams of income that we have as a family that we couldn't live without. But all of them means that we are able to be more generous, save more for the future, invest more so that there's wealth to pass on to the next generations, and so we want to have multiple streams of income so that we're not dependent on one, right? We don't become captive to just one thing, that we have to keep everybody that is in charge of making decisions in that room where that employment decision is made happy so that we can keep that job, right? We have multiple streams of income, and we're not also vulnerable to the swings, the highs and lows of the market. And then also passion. Like I said, nobody's forcing you to do it. You are in that business because you chose to be, and you're passionate about it and you love it. And when you're passionate about it and you love it, the people around you, you're easier to be around. And sometimes I think that's part of ranching, right? Is the reason sometimes people don't come back to the ranch is because it wasn't fun. It wasn't a lot of fun, right? And when we can make it fun again, make ranching fun again, then maybe people are willing to come back to it, a little bit more willing to come back to it. And that creates its own set of challenges, but also challenges that we can be innovative in trying to solve. So, what are some commonalities among successful entrepreneurs? I think that they are not afraid to be first, right? As I said, you don't have to be first. Sometimes just innovating on somebody's innovation and doing it a little bit more smoothly or better is important and is helpful. And that will be the key to success, right? Somebody else is doing this, but we're going to do it a little different and approach it a little bit in a way that makes it a more pleasant experience for everybody involved. And sometimes that is the key to success. So they're not afraid to be the first out of the boat. They're not afraid to be, the first guy down the ladder. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, right? They're not afraid to be the first person to do something. They're not afraid to be talked about at the coffee shop as, did you see what Jared's doing? Look at all that beautiful hay right behind him there that he could be harvesting with a swather. Instead, there he is grazing it, And so, they're not afraid to be first or do something differently. But they're also willing to quit. They're also willing to quit. Sometimes we got to just say, hey, this isn't cutting it. This isn't cutting it. If we've invested, we've given this an honest try. We have tried to make this work. And for whatever reason, it's not the right time. It's not the right time to do it in the marketplace. And we're going to shelve this. We're going to take what we've learned and go away and say, we'll come back to it later, maybe when the market is right. But they're willing to quit some things too, I think sometimes is what sets entrepreneurs apart. But don't quit too soon, right? Seth Godin wrote a book called The Dip, and he said that most times people quit in the dip right before the success was about to come, right? And that's when Jared asked me, what's the key to success in podcasting? I said, being too dumb to quit. Sometimes that's it. Be too dumb to quit. And I've talked to a lot of ranchers in their 80s and 90s who've told me basically the same thing. Like, we just didn't give up. How did you amass this land base? Well, my folks homesteaded here in 1910, and when everybody was clearing out in the 20s and 30s and 40s, we were buying their parcels, and we didn't give up. We just kept going. And so, don't be afraid to quit, but don't quit too soon, and stick with it and continue to work long hours. Dave Pratt, I appreciate what he said. It is possible to build an sustainable business on unsustainable effort, but not for very long, right? You might have to work long hours for a period of time, but that's not going to work forever, right? That's not going to work forever. You've got to put in the hours it takes to get things going, and then distribute that workload, delegate that authority to somebody else so that they've got the opportunity to step in and do what they need to do to help move the ball forward. So we might have to work hard, long hours for a time, but entrepreneurship is about those multiple streams of income and changing that paradigm, as Ranching for Profit is fond of pointing out, Dallas Mount and others, that we all grow up in ranching with a paradigm, and really just in life, we grow up with this paradigm of the more I work, the more money I make. Whereas entrepreneurs, I think, start to see that there are certain things where the same amount of force on this lever in a different place generates a larger return. And they start to see it's not always the amount of work that I put in that determines the amount of money I make. Sometimes it's just having the right thing to sell to the right market at the right time and in the right place. And that is a determiner of success sometimes as much as anything else. So those are some of the commonalities between entrepreneurs. And I think that as we start to flesh out this definition of ranchers, right? I don't want to stick with our boring definition that we started with. And so we're going to talk about the fact that we are optimizing the commons. Ranchers should be optimizing the commons. What is the one thing? Drop this in the chat. We'll give you a second to think about it. Maybe give Jared an opportunity to ask a question here. What is one thing with which all ranchers are equally entrusted? So while people have a chance to think about that, Jared, and drop something in the chat, what they think the answer to that question is. Do you have any questions or comments or thoughts so far?
No, I think this is great. This is an awesome discussion, very timely. And just today, in fact, I had the question, and you probably get it as often as I do, is how does a young person get started ranching? And I think, in a roundabout way, you're answering it, right? It's by doing these things. It's not by doing the business that Grandpa built. There are principles that we can take. Certainly, the work ethic, the legacy, the connection with family, hard work, those things are absolutely applicable. But to be able to do business as was done 50 years ago or 100 years ago is probably not really practical or feasible. Would you agree?
Yeah. Well, I think that was what made it different, right? They in those times, I think they were experiencing rapid asset appreciation, asset value appreciation, right? I mean, the, these some of these ranches in my neighborhood were bought for $1 an acre. you know, and you'd be lucky to touch most of them for $800 an acre now. And I know that's low compared to a lot of places in the world, and maybe I shouldn't say that out loud to the internet because they'll all know that we've got affordable land in South Dakota. But I mean, it is the amount of asset value appreciation that they experienced was big back in those days, and so I think that was part of what made those ranches work, right? Well, can we count on that? I don't know. I think every generation probably says, no, you can't count on that. It's always this is the highest it's ever going to be. It's never going to get any higher. Sometimes they're right. Sometimes they're wrong. But should we build that into our business model that this $800 an acre land in Western South Dakota is going to be worth the $25,000 an acre the farmland in Iowa is worth now in the next 50 years? I don't think we should build that into our business model. I think we should try to optimize the commons. And I think the answer to this question is, what is the one thing which all ranches are with which all ranchers are equally entrusted is sunshine. We all get sunshine. Not everybody gets rain. Not everybody gets the same amount of rain. Not everybody gets rain at the same time of the year. Not everybody's rain is equally dependable, right? I've interviewed ranchers in the Chihuahuan Desert who count on 9 inches of rain a year. But for the last couple of years, they've had 2. And so their context is different than ours, right? Their context is different than Missouri. But we all get sunshine. And so how do we take care of that sunshine? How do we make use of that sunshine? And I think the most important thing, as I understand it, first of all, you've got to understand your context. Where are you in the world? Are you in Missouri with 35 inches of rain? Are you in the Chihuahuan Desert with 9 inches of rain, but sometimes 2? Are you in the Ruby Valley with, access to irrigation or the Clover Valley with access to irrigation, and so understand your context. And then after you understand your context and what's been done to that land or what's happened on that land before you got there, I think the next thing that we've got to do is cover the soil. We need to have a good armor on the soil, a good piece of cover on the soil, and it needs to protect the soil because you've got an underground herd of microbes, and they work for you for free or for room and board. If you put a roof over their head and provide them with water, then they will work for you without pay other than those 2 things until they die, and they'll never take a sick day, and they'll never ask for vacation, and they'll never ask for a raise. Now, does that sound like an ideal employee to anyone else? Right? This is Steve Kenyon, credit to Steve Kenyon. Told Jared I would tell him how I approach quoting people in public. Well, I heard a pastor one time say that all pastors are just thieves stealing from other thieves, right? We don't have original ideas, we just borrow from other people. And he said, so my rule is to name the person, I am quoting for the first time in public. When I quote them, I name them. The second time I quote them, I say, "You've heard it said." And then the third time I quote them, I say, "I've always said." And so that's how I approach quoting people in public. But anyway, Steve Kenyon talks about our underground employees, right? They never ask for a sick day, they never ask for a raise, and they work until they die, and they never ask for vacation, right? If we provide them with room and board, room is that thatch layer of armor on the soil. Board is the water in the soil that allows them to make their trades underground. And so we've got, just as an example, I know this is a dung beetle, but we've got all kinds of critters like this that offer that do that work for us. If we give them a place to do it, if we give them room and board, they will do that work for us, and they will continue to make things better under the soil. And as I understand it, through my work with Understanding Ag and others, we haven't found the upper limit. We haven't found the upper limit. It just keeps getting better, and it doesn't really stop getting better. And so it might slow down in its progress of getting better, but it doesn't really stop getting better. It just kind of continues to trend upward in its quality. And so I think that is important for us to remember, is that we've got to take care of them. We need to provide them with armor on the soil. The next thing that I think is a key, these are just the 6 principles of soil health, right? Context, armor on the soil, diversity, and that is diversity of roots. And I appreciated the way that Harry Cope from Missouri said it on the podcast recently. He said, diversity in everything but the livestock, right? That's been our approach a lot of times in agriculture, is big, black, beautiful cattle. That's the only livestock you want. That's the only livestock that'll increase the size of the belt buckle you get to wear to the coffee shop, right, Jared? And so we want diversity, not just in the livestock. We want diversity in the plants. We want diversity in the underground microbes. We want diversity everywhere we can get it, and probably also in the livestock. We want diversity of livestock. I think, like I said, beef, lamb, pork, chicken. I think all of that fits into the ecosystems that we are managing, and some better than others, honestly, right? Yes, big, black, beautiful calves get you talked about on the market report for the sale barn. But is this land, especially in the West, and I think, Jared, you agree with me, is this land best suited to big, black, beautiful calves? Maybe not. It might be actually more suited to small white sheep. It might be more well suited to goats, right? Sometimes we just need to forego the ego and run something else and have diversity in something other in the livestock as well, right? So we want to understand our context. We want to have armor on the soil. We want to have diversity of roots and livestock. We want to integrate livestock on every acre. No caveats. No caveats. Every acre in American agriculture should have livestock integrated every year. I'm just not going to caveat that statement. You can have my witch trial later, but that's my statement, and I'm sticking to it. We want to have a living root in the soil as long as possible throughout the year. Something photosynthesizing out there throughout the year, and it's possible. It is happening on certain acres. There are people who are doing this on every acre, and so we want to do that. Those are the things we're shooting for. And the last one is reduced disturbance, reduced mechanical and chemical disturbance. I think we should have both, and reduced mechanical and chemical disturbance. We don't want to use pesticides, herbicides, fungicides. That's all CIDE. It ends in death, right? We're killing something, and we're killing a lot of things we don't know we're killing, just to take care of the flies we can see, just to take care of the weeds we can see. And so I think that's something that we should also keep in mind, is reduced chemical disturbance as well as reduced mechanical disturbance in the form of tillage and other things. And so we want to optimize the commons. We want to make sure that all of these relationships are as good as they can be. And I think the key to doing that is humility. I don't understand why I've got as much cheatgrass on my place as I do, but I'm going to trust that I didn't abuse that land, and that something about this year that also made lots of green needle grass grow that I haven't seen before also made the cheatgrass grow. And I'm not happy about it, but it's where we are. And I'm going to have a little bit of humility and say, maybe I messed up, or maybe it's just the year. Maybe it's the fact that we had no snow cover this winter. It was a really easy, open winter, and maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know. But I'm gonna trust that if I continue to manage in a way that I know is, as I understand it best, then those things are going to take care of themselves. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time worrying about what is there or what isn't there. I'm going to do my best to manage for what I want, not worry about what's there that I don't necessarily want. And so I think that brings us full circle back to, we talked about what is a rancher. I told you I was going to give you the most boring definition you've ever heard for what a rancher is. And now we're going to look at a definition of what is a ranching entrepreneur. And I think a ranching entrepreneur is a businessman that pursues profit by managing land and livestock in such a way that optimizes the common resources of sunshine and precipitation. We all get that. Some of us get more precipitation than others, as I said, and stresses the resources under management, and those are land, animals, money, and people, as little as possible. If you can reduce the stress on your land, reduce the stress on your animals, reduce the stress on your money, like cash flow works, there's always money in the bank account to go get groceries, right? The cash flow situation is working, and reduce the stress on your people. I don't know how to define the good life more than that, right? The land isn't stressed. The animals aren't stressed. And we all know that happy, unstressed animals gain weight better and go through stressful times in their life better. They shed off viruses and diseases easier. And so if we can reduce the stress on our land, animals, money, and people while optimizing the common resources of sunshine and precipitation, I think then we can call ourselves ranching entrepreneurs, and we can see a better chance at success than we would otherwise if we just tried to approach things according to the conventional paradigm. So, any thoughts there, Jared?
No, that's awesome. I really like that definition. And again, kind of back to our grandfathers, they were entrepreneurs. They were individuals. Well, my grandfather in particular, we went through the Great Depression, started out with sheep, and came out of the Depression wealthy. Whereas many of others who went through that, some committed suicide, some of them went bankrupt. Some of them, the bank took over their farms and ranches. So you definitely have to apply these principles and talk a little bit more about that humility and contrast that with the hubris and the pride that we have of wanting to be right, and what the cost is of the ego or the pride that makes us, do certain things.
Yeah. I've asked pretty much everyone I can think of to ask this question. Where are we at in understanding what's going on in the soil? And they're saying 5 to 10%. We understand 5 to 10% of what's happening under the soil. And so to me, that should humble us and say, okay, I probably don't know enough to go out and try to control something with 2,4-D. I probably don't understand enough of what's going on under the soil to say, I'm going to spray this to take care of that weed, right? And I honestly, monocultures are the problem here, right? As I understand it, monocultures it's the nature wants diversity. God designed a diverse system, and nature wants to be diverse. And so their monocultures are always going to be plagued by, quote unquote, plagued by diversity trying to creep back in, right? We don't call them weeds at our house. They're nature's cover crop, right? There's evidence there of either mismanagement or the system going through a healing process. I think a lot of times weeds are pulling nutrients to the soil, right? Calcium, dandelions, I think, pull calcium to the soil surface so that they're usable to the plants. And so we just need to, I think, slow down. I mean, I've asked Gabe Brown that question. I've asked Nicole Masters that question. I've asked all those kind of people that question. How much of what's happening under the soil do we understand? And they're saying 5 to 10%. And so we just need to have some humility and say, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not comfortable with the amount of cheatgrass out there right now. Maybe it's a lesson for me to do a better job of managing, or maybe it's just this year that we're in, the soil condition that I have inherited from before me is this is part of its process, and I'm going to let it do its thing, and I'm going to try and do what I know to be best.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, appreciate that, and amen.
I think one thing else I would point out here is this picture of a ranching entrepreneur. This guy appears to be thinking to me, and I think that's an important part of our success as ranchers is giving ourselves time to think. This episode I just am working on releasing here in a couple of weeks with Dallas Mount. He says something in the course of that episode about the fact that a lot of times what we need to do is outsource the 10 and $15 an hour jobs so that we have time to spend working on the $100 and $1,000 an hour jobs, right? So we can start thinking about a marketing plan for cull cows. We can do the math on what difference would it make if we didn't cull cows when everybody else is culling their cows? What difference would it make if we shrunk our cow herd, ran fewer cows, and brought in custom grazers to graze in the growing season? Would we make more money doing that, right? And if that means I have to pay the neighbor's kid $15 an hour to go put fence clips on, maybe it's worth it, right? And so I think thinking is a big part of success in ranching as an entrepreneur. Being able to just think about, what does the market need? What do the market cycles tell me is going to be required when they're going to be wanting to buy cows at this time? Maybe I should have some cows around to sell them when they want them and when the price is highest.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Alan Nation was probably already passed on before he started podcasting. Otherwise, I'm sure he would be on your podcast. And he said that in his book, Knowledge of Ranching, the rancher's most important job is to think. And I really like Bob Proctor. He said that, again, both of those individuals are dead now, but he said that we think, and really what we're doing is we just worry. So there's a difference between worrying and thinking, and that creative. Einstein said, imagination is more powerful or greater than knowledge. And I think that's what thinking is it's stretching. And that's what all great innovators and entrepreneurs have done those things. They've looked at where things are and they've said, okay, this, be content, as Bud Williams says. I'm quoting a lot of people that I really admire. Bud Williams says, be content, but never be satisfied. At the end of the day, be content, but always be looking at, okay, what went well, measure your progress, but also what can I improve on?
Yeah.
And so yeah, thinking, absolutely. That's what we want to promote at Ag Steward. And I think with the Working Cows podcast, right, is what you hope is that people will actually take the time to think and not just be stuck in that rut.
Yeah. I've been saying for a long time, I'm not here to tell you what to think. So if young people, if you're listening to the podcast and you're writing down notes to pitch the meeting, to your dad, that's not what I'm here for. I'm not here for you to go change your folks' business necessarily. I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'm just here to give you something to think about. Right. And I just want to give you something to think about. And maybe that looks like a presentation to your dad about here's an opportunity that we could take advantage of. A couple things that come to my mind. Somebody recently, and I can't remember who it was, or I would quote them by name because it's the first time I've quoted them in public. But they said that worry is just like praying that all your worst fears would come true. Worry is just praying that all your worst fears would come true. And so, submit yourself to God and pray and ask him for his help and his guidance and his wisdom. You know, the book of James says if we ask for wisdom, God gives us wisdom generously. If we're his children, if we've come to him on the basis of faith in Christ, then you're his child and he delights to give you good and perfect gifts, and wisdom is one of those. If you come to him and you ask him for wisdom, he gives generously to you. And so uh, godliness with contentment is great gain. I think that's 1 Timothy 6:6 or 6:10. So, you know, I mean, I'm just feeding off of the quotes you are giving too. You know, I think those are all things that we shouldn't discount either. Those should be part of how we think about managing our businesses, is the role that faith plays in these things.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, I see you've got your contact information, but for those who are listening to the podcast, go ahead and tell them how to get a hold of you. Probably everybody knows, but let's plug it for those that might be first timers.
Yeah. If I'm doing things right, every single episode that I've ever released is on one page at ranchingpodcast.com. And sometimes it takes me a day or two to get things updated on that page, but that's where you can go and find every episode that I've ever released, ranchingpodcast.com. And if you want to get a hold of me, 605-549-5401, leave a voicemail and I'll try to get back in touch with you.
Yeah, this has been great, Clay. This has been awesome. So this is the caliber speaker we love to have on these podcasts. And so the webinar that is repurposed as a podcast is how we do it. We like to have a live audience. It seems like many of you are repeat customers. You're here. For those that are here for the first time, joining our Ag Steward family, we invite you to stick around. In the middle of August, if you have subscribed and you're here live, you will be getting information about a summit that we have in August. We do those 4 times a year. And we also do the 2-day intensive classes called the Profitable Steward class, where we work on your business, helping you become a profitable steward over the resources that God's entrusted you with. And really our mission at Ag Steward is to help family-owned farmers and ranchers become highly profitable, regenerate the land they steward, and create viable businesses that can last for generations. That's our goal. We're going to talk a lot about legacy, about regeneration. We talk about relationships and some of those key things that are the underlying things that will help your business to be successful and be truly regenerative for generations to come. Right? We can do all the things on the soil surface level and the production things that we love about agriculture. But if we have relationship breakdowns, emotional breakdowns, we just get burnt out, you know, that we could die with our music left within us. So I wanted to ask one final question here of you, and then we can open it up for questions from the audience if anybody has one. And then we might, if you have a few extra minutes, we might do it a little bit informal after we cut the recording for those that might be camera shy. So there's a term, and I did not even know how to spell it, but a Japanese term, ikigai. Do you know what that term means, first of all? So I'll read the definition here for those. A Japanese concept referring to something that gives a person a sense of purpose and a reason for living. How does that relate to entrepreneurship, ranching, and kind of overlaying what I believe is our God-given mission, our purpose, our sole purpose with entrepreneurship and specific within ranching? Can you speak to that a little bit, Clay, and kind of what your thoughts are around that?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that purpose, ultimately, you know, for me, purpose comes in knowing. Somebody quoted Ecclesiastes in the chat earlier, and I just started preaching through the book of Ecclesiastes. And at the end of the book of Ecclesiastes, it says, this is the sum of the whole matter: fear God and keep his commandments, for all will be brought into judgment someday. Right. And the purpose for me is to give all those resources that God has entrusted to me back to him better than I received them. Land animals, money, people. I want to give it all back to him in a way that's it's better than the condition it came to me in, right? And when I talk about uh, people specifically, I'm talking about my family. I want to invest in them, and so that becomes a testing question, honestly, in a lot of things. Like I said earlier, can I manage beef, poultry, pork, uh, layers, sheep? Can I do all that well? No. And still be a wife to a husband to my wife and a father to my children? No. And so I don't. Can I move my cows 4 times a day? Would it be better for my land if I move my cows 4 times a day? Yeah. Would it be better for my family if I move my cows 4 times a day? No. So I don't. you know, uh, I think that really should be higher on the list for us. In That's a resource under management. Those are people, and they're our most important people. They're the people that we're going to have birthdays and Christmases with, and they're the people who are going to show up when we're sick and in the hospital and maybe dying. They're going to be there beside our deathbeds, if God is so kind to us, And so, uh, we want to make sure that we're taking care of those relationships as well, and I appreciate what Jolene Brown says about being a business first family. We take care of the business so that it isn't a burden, so that it isn't a weight, so that we are profitable, so that we can enjoy our Christmases and our birthdays, and so that fights and discussions about how are we going to take care of this portion of our business don't creep into Christmas celebrations and family dinners and birthday celebrations. We've got that taken care of. That happened between the hours of 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. or whatever hours you want to say you work. That happened then. We took care of business, and now we're a family. And I think that is important. And so that gives me purpose. Is God has entrusted me with these things. He's going to look over how I manage them, and I want them to be better when I give them back to Him.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you for that. Very good. Another question here that somebody had is, who've been your mentors? Are there individuals who that you look up to that have had a significant influence in your life?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, um, my parents, first of all, I always say this, my parents were heroes. They started their ranch in the 80s from nothing. uh, Entrepreneur, talk about entrepreneurship, right? My mom taught 35 years of public school. My dad worked for 35 years as a phone for the phone company. He worked lineman, construction, maintenance. He did all that, you know, and they did it so that they could achieve their dream of starting a ranch. And they did it. They accomplished it. They were both able to retire what some people would probably consider retire early and ranch. And it was their retirement income. And so, you know, they have inspired me. My wife and my kids inspire me to be better every day. Uh, I want to lead them well. I want to be a good husband and a good father to them. That inspires me to be better. Mentors, in the ranching industry, in the podcast industry, a lot of those have been remote. They haven't known that they're doing that.
Yeah.
Some of them have been in person. Dallas Mount, Bart Carmichael, um, Derek Schwanebeck, Logan Pribino, some of these guys that I talk to outside of podcast episodes from time to time, and there's lots of others. Just start naming names and you feel bad for the ones you leave out. Jared Lumen and Brian Alexander Jared Lumen from the
Podcasters.
Herd Quitter podcast and Brian Alexander from the Ranching Reboot podcast. Those guys have been guys that I have been inspired by for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. What is the legacy? What's the thing that you want to be remembered by? What do you want to have inscribed on your tombstone?
Well, I told my wife if I die in a funny way, I want that on my tombstone. So, um, husband and a father, If that's it, I'd be happy. I think that's it.
That,
Honestly, I've told my board this too. The elders here at the church where I'm a pastor. I will
mhm.
quit everything to maintain being a husband and a father. I'll quit podcasting. I'll quit pastoring. I'll quit everything. Maintain that. And they have all, to their credit, said you would be making the right choice to do that. And so,
Yeah,
yeah, that's it for me.
that's good. Yeah, good priorities. I appreciate that. And well, this has been awesome. This has been awesome. We appreciate the work that you do in this industry and the influence you have. Isn't it wonderful that we live at a time and an age when we can be like Tom and be plugged in to this when we're in our swather, and we can go back and watch and rewatch and what was that quote, and share this with other people. I just think we live, in a great age when technology can serve us. And please use it for that. Please share this episode and help the word to be able to be spread. So, any final comments before we wrap up the official part of this, and then we'll do a little informal Q&A.
No, just to God be the glory. Whatever good somebody's gotten out of the podcast, it's I'm just a channel, just a vessel, an imperfect one at that.
Amen. Well, thank you very much, and we hope you join us again. So we do these things live on the second and fourth Thursdays at 4 o'clock Pacific. You can find out information if you look for Ag
Thanks.
Steward, search for that. The Profitable Steward on Facebook, and we're on YouTube and different podcast channels as well. So we hope you'll join us live and pass on the recording. Thanks everybody for being here. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for the opportunity, Jared.